The building was quiet and cold as the night began to fall. Most workers had already gone home. The lights in the long hallway flickered slightly, and the sound of a mop sliding across the floor echoed gently through the air. Ethan moved slowly with his cleaning cart. His hands were rough but careful. His eyes were tired but calm. He worked the night shift at Stone Enterprises, the biggest company in the city. But no one really knew who he was. To most people, he was just the janitor. He wore the same dark blue uniform every night. His name tag was scratched and faded. He kept his head down and never caused any trouble. He did his job quietly and left before the sun came up. Every night was the same. Until tonight. Behind one closed office door, a loud voice broke the silence. "I don't care how kind he is. I would never date a janitor." Ethan stopped moving. His hand rested on the handle of his mop. He stood still and listened. He knew that voice. It belonged to Madeline Stone, the CEO of the company, the woman at the top. Rich, powerful, beautiful, cold. She was talking on the phone. Her voice was sharp, full of pride and anger. "I worked too hard to end up with someone who cleans floors. Do you know how that would look? No way. Not ever." Ethan turned away and pushed his cart toward the stairwell. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes seemed darker than before. He walked down the steps slowly, each one heavier than the last. Later that night, as he cleaned the break room, a small voice called out from the corner, "Daddy, I can't sleep." It was Lila, his 6-year-old daughter. She sat curled up in a big office chair, holding a small stuffed bear in her arms. Ethan walked over and knelt beside her. He brushed a hand over her hair. "I'm sorry, sweet pea. Just a little longer. Then we'll go home." Lila nodded sleepily, her eyes half closed. She had been coming to work with Ethan for the past 2 weeks. Since her babysitter left town, Ethan had no family nearby, no help, only his job and his daughter. He did not want her there, but he had no choice. As he tucked her jacket tighter around her small body, the door creaked open. "What is this?" It was Madeline, standing tall in her heels and black coat, looking down at them with cold eyes. Ethan stood up quickly. He kept himself between Madeline and his daughter. "I didn't have anyone to watch her. She stays quiet. She doesn't touch anything." Madeline crossed her arms. Her gaze moved to the sleeping child, then back to Ethan. "This is a place of business, not a daycare." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand." There was a long silence. Madeline looked again at Lila. Something in her eyes softened for just a moment, but it disappeared quickly. "Get her out of here before someone important sees her." She turned and left without waiting for a reply. Ethan picked up Lila and carried her to a quiet corner of the supply closet. She lay her head on his shoulder and soon fell back asleep. He looked at her and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby girl. Just a little longer. One more night. One more shift." Far above, in her glass office, Madeline stared out at the city lights. Her face was hard, but her thoughts were not. Why did that little girl look so familiar? Why did her eyes seem so full of something she had forgotten? Something warm, something real. Madeline shook her head and turned back to her laptop. She had work to finish. The janitor was not her concern, but deep in her chest, something small began to move. Something she had not felt in years. Ethan finished cleaning the top floor. He looked out the window at the moonlit sky and took a deep breath. No one knew who he really was. No one asked, and that was fine with him. But secrets do not stay hidden forever. And his was about to change everything. As the clock hit midnight, Ethan whispered again to himself, "Just keep going. For her. Always for her." And with that, the man with the mop walked down the long hallway, carrying a secret no one could see, but one that would soon touch the heart of even the coldest CEO. The next night came fast, and the office was still the same. Cold floors, bright lights, empty halls. Ethan walked in with his cart and a soft voice behind him. "Daddy, do I have to stay in the closet again?" Lila held her small teddy bear close to her chest. Her eyes looked tired but hopeful. Ethan bent down and kissed her forehead. "No, baby. Tonight you can stay near me. But you have to be quiet. Can you do that?" Lila nodded and smiled. As they walked through the hallway, Lila hummed a little tune. It was soft like a lullaby, something her mother used to sing. Ethan paused. His eyes stared at the floor, just for a second. Then he kept walking. Inside the break room, Lila sat at the round table and took out her crayons. She began drawing on the back of an old paper, drawing a house, a big one, with flowers and windows and a swing set. Ethan wiped the counters and swept the floor. His eyes kept looking at her, full of love, and something else too, something like worry. Then the door opened without warning. Madeline Stone stepped inside. She froze when she saw the child. Lila looked up and smiled. "Hi, lady." Madeline raised an eyebrow. Ethan quickly stood between them. "I told her to stay here. I was watching her." Madeline looked at him, then looked at the paper in Lila's hands. "What's that you're drawing?" Lila held it up. "It's the house Daddy said he'll build one day." Madeline stared at the picture. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Ethan reached out for the paper, but Madeline took it first. Her hand touched the crayon lines, the roof, the doors, the sky. Her fingers stopped at the name written in the corner. Lila. Madeline looked at the girl, then at Ethan. "Where's her mother?" Ethan looked down. "She passed away 3 years ago. Car accident. I was supposed to pick her up that night, but I worked late. She went alone." His voice broke a little, but he didn't cry. Madeline stood still. No words came from her mouth, just silence. Then she handed the drawing back and turned to leave. "Keep her out of sight. You understand?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." But before she left, Lila asked, "Do you have kids?" Madeline stopped walking. "No." "Do you have a husband?" "No." "Why not?" Madeline didn't answer. She just walked away, her heels clicking down the hallway. Lila turned to Ethan. "She's sad." "I can tell." Ethan smiled a little. "She hides it well." Later that night, Madeline sat in her office, the picture still in her hand. The house looked so simple, so peaceful, and the child who drew it had nothing. No big room, no toys, no mother. Yet her drawing was full of light. Madeline thought of her own life, the large apartment, the empty bed, the silence every time she came home. Outside the office, Ethan pushed his cart toward the elevator. Lila asleep in his arms, wrapped in a blanket. He passed a group of workers laughing in the break room. They didn't even notice him, just the janitor. But Madeline noticed something that night. She opened her laptop and typed in a few words. A search, a name, Ethan Carter. But nothing came up. She tried again, this time with the name Lila Carter. Still nothing. She frowned. No social accounts. No work history. No address. It was like they didn't exist. She leaned back in her chair. Who is this man? Why can't I find anything? Why does he seem like someone who's hiding? And why do I even care? Meanwhile, Ethan stood on the sidewalk, waiting for the last bus. Lila still sleeping in his arms. He looked up at the stars, his breath cold in the night air. He whispered to himself, "She asked about your mother tonight. She's getting curious. She's growing up." He hugged her tighter. "I'm doing my best, baby girl, even if no one sees it." Back in her office, Madeline looked again at the child's drawing. She didn't understand why it was hard to throw it away. She placed it inside her drawer instead. Something deep inside her, something long forgotten, had started to stir. Not just because of the drawing, not just because of the child, but because of the man with the tired eyes, and the voice that held more than pain. It held truth, truth she had not heard in a long time. And though she didn't know it yet, That truth would soon change everything. Rain fell softly outside the building that night. The sky was dark and quiet. The city lights shimmered in the puddles on the sidewalk. Inside the office, Ethan rolled his cart slowly. His back ached. But he did not stop. Lila sat nearby on a chair, drawing again with her crayons, humming softly to herself. Madeline watched them from the second-floor balcony. She leaned on the railing, her eyes fixed on the janitor and his little girl. She did not understand why she kept noticing them, why she kept thinking about that drawing, why she kept wondering about his life. Her assistant walked up behind her and said, "You're still here. It's almost midnight." Madeline nodded, but said nothing. Later that night, after everyone had gone, she sat in her office, the picture still inside her drawer. She pulled it out and stared at it. Then she opened her laptop again. She typed slowly, "Ethan Carter, Lila Carter." Still no results. Still no files. Still no record. It made no sense. Every employee had records, even janitors. But Ethan had none. She called the HR manager the next morning. "I need the file for Ethan Carter." The manager looked confused. "We don't have an Ethan Carter on payroll." "Are you sure about the name?" Madeline froze. "Yes. He works night shifts. Tall man. Dark hair. Always quiet." The manager checked again. "Sorry, ma'am. No such name in the system." Madeline hung up, her hands trembling just a little. "Who are you?" she whispered. That night, she waited for Ethan near the elevator. He looked surprised to see her. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" She crossed her arms. "I checked our records. There's no Ethan Carter listed." Ethan looked calm, but his eyes grew sharper. "I use a different name for work. I needed the job, so I used a friend's ID. That's illegal," she said firmly. He nodded. "I know, but I had no choice. Lila needed food. She needed school. I tried everything else. This was the only way." Madeline's voice softened just a little. "You used to be someone else, didn't you?" Ethan stayed silent for a moment. Then he nodded again. "Yes, I used to be an architect." Madeline blinked. An architect. Ethan leaned against the wall, his voice low and slow. "I had my own firm. Won some awards. Big projects. Tall buildings. Busy days. Happy nights. Then one day, my wife called. She had a flat tire. I told her I was too busy. She went out to fix it alone." His voice cracked. "A drunk driver hit her on the highway." Madeline's eyes lowered. She didn't speak. After that, I couldn't sit at a desk. I couldn't look at another design. I sold the company. Gave away everything. Took Lila and disappeared. "You left your life behind," she said quietly. "I left the part that didn't matter," he replied. "All I kept was her." Ethan turned to leave, but Madeline stopped him. "Why didn't you ask for help?" "Because people like you don't help people like me." Madeline said nothing as he walked away. His words stayed in her ears like a whisper that wouldn't leave. Later, she sat at her desk, looking at the blueprint on her wall. It was one of her father's first buildings. Strong, perfect, cold. She looked at the picture from Lila again. The little house with flowers and color and life. She opened a new tab on her computer. Typed in, "Ethan Carter Architect." Finally, a result appeared. An old article. A young man in a suit, smiling beside a tall building model. The headline read, "Ethan Carter, the rising star of modern design." She stared at the photo. It was him, but different, brighter, hopeful, whole. She looked out her window at the night sky. She felt something strange, a mix of guilt, curiosity, and something else, admiration. The next night, Ethan found a small envelope on his cart. Inside was a drawing from Lila, but it had been framed. A note was attached. "For your daughter. She has a gift. And so do you." No name, but he knew who sent it. He looked up toward the top floor. The office light was on. A shadow moved behind the glass. He smiled just a little. Lila ran up beside him. Daddy, do you think the mean lady is turning nice? Ethan looked at her and said, maybe she's just remembering how. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet. Reflections danced in the puddles as the lights of the city glowed. Inside the building, Ethan pushed his cart slowly through the hallway. Lila walked beside him, swinging her arms, humming a small tune. At the far end of the hallway, the elevator door opened. Madeline stepped out. Her eyes found them quickly. Her heels clicked softly against the tile floor. Ethan looked up, surprised to see her there so early. She stopped in front of him and said, "Do you have a minute?" Ethan nodded. He moved his cart to the side and told Lila to stay close. Madeline looked nervous. She cleared her throat. "There's a small restaurant a few blocks away. It's quiet. Good food. I'd like to take you and your daughter there tonight." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I want to." Lila smiled and clapped her hands. "Yay, dinner. Can I get fries?" Ethan looked at Madeline again, then nodded slowly. "We'll come." An hour later, they sat at a small table near the window. Warm lights hung above them. Soft music played in the background. Madeline wore a light blue dress, simple but elegant. Her hair was tied back. She looked different, softer. Lila sat between them, coloring on a napkin with a red crayon, talking about her teddy bear and school and cartoons. Madeline listened. She smiled. She even laughed once. Ethan watched her quietly, not with judgment, but with quiet wonder, like he was seeing another side of someone he thought he understood. The food arrived. Lila ate happily, her face covered in ketchup and joy. Madeline leaned forward. "She's amazing. So full of light." Ethan smiled. "She's all I have. I try to give her the best of me, even if the best is not much." Madeline shook her head. "You gave up everything for her. That's not weakness. That's strength." Ethan looked out the window. "It didn't feel like strength when I was sleeping in my car, or when I had to lie just to get a job." Madeline stayed quiet. Ethan continued. "I was angry at the world, at myself, at everything. But then I looked at her, and I knew I had no right to give up." His voice grew softer. "She deserves a happy life, even if mine is broken." Madeline looked at him carefully, her hands folded on the table. She whispered, "You're not broken, Ethan. You just lost something too big to carry alone." For a moment, silence held the table like a blanket. Then Lila looked up and said, "Can we get ice cream?" They all laughed. After dinner, they walked slowly back toward the office. The streets were quiet. The air smelled like rain. Ethan carried Lila on his back. She giggled as they passed the glowing shop windows. Madeline walked beside them, her hands in her coat pockets, her heart full of thoughts she didn't understand. At the front of the building, a black car pulled up. A tall man stepped out, wearing a sharp suit and a proud smile. Madeline froze. "Jason," she whispered. Jason smiled and walked toward her. "There you are. I've been trying to reach you. And what is this?" "Dinner with the janitor and his little kid." "How charming." Ethan stepped forward. He didn't say a word, just looked Jason in the eyes. Madeline felt the pressure. She looked at Jason, then at Ethan, then at Lila. Jason laughed. "Come on, Mads. Let's go. Leave this fairy tale behind." Madeline stood still, her heart racing, her voice caught in her throat. Ethan turned to Lila. "Come on, sweet pea. Let's get you inside." Lila looked at Madeline and waved. "Bye, nice lady." Ethan didn't look back. Jason raised an eyebrow. "You're really going to walk away and let this ruin your name? What are you doing, Madeline?" But Madeline didn't answer. She just stared at the door as it closed behind Ethan and Lila. She felt something sharp. Not pain, not shame. Something else. Regret. Back in her office, she sat in the dark, the picture still on her desk. The little house with flowers and a swing. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jason. "You're better than this." She turned the phone face down. In the janitor's closet, Ethan tucked Lila into a pile of blankets. She fell asleep quickly, a small smile still on her lips. Ethan looked out the window. His reflection stared back at him. Tired, silent, strong. He whispered to the night, "I won't be your secret, not even for her." And somewhere above, Madeline sat alone, looking out into the same night sky, trying to decide if she had the courage to let the world see what her heart already knew. The office felt colder than usual that night, not because of the air, but because of the space between two people who once shared a small warm moment. Madeline sat alone in her glass office. She looked at the framed picture on her desk, Lila's drawing, the happy little house with flowers and a swing. She touched the corner of the frame with her fingers. Her thoughts were heavy, her heart full of noise she could not silence. Ethan had not come to work in 3 days. No calls, no messages, no sign of him or Lila. Madeline told herself it did not matter, told herself she needed to focus, told herself she did the right thing. But every time she looked at that picture, her chest felt tight. Outside her office, her assistant knocked gently and walked in. "You have a meeting in 20 minutes. With the investors from New York." Madeline nodded slowly. "Thank you." Before the assistant left, she paused and said, "Are you okay? You seem different lately." Madeline looked up and forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." But she was not fine. Later that evening, as the halls grew quiet again, she walked down to the lower floor, to the janitor's closet. The door was closed. The light was off. The little blanket pile was gone. No crayons. No teddy bear. No trace of them. She sat on the floor outside the door, alone, still dressed in her perfect heels and business coat. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Jason. "We have reservations tomorrow. Don't forget. Be the woman they respect." She turned the phone off. That night, Ethan sat on a park bench miles away from the city. Lila curled up beside him, sleeping under his coat, the stars above them quiet and bright. He looked at her face, so peaceful, so pure. He ran a hand through her hair and whispered, "We'll be okay, just like always." But deep down, he was tired. He had walked away, not because he wanted to, but because he refused to be someone's secret, someone's shame. He remembered Jason's face, the way he mocked them, the way Madeline said nothing. Ethan could handle being poor. He could handle pain. But he would not let his daughter see him treated like nothing. Not again. The next morning, Lila handed him a small folded paper. It was another drawing. A tall lady with red shoes holding a flower. Beside her was a man with a mop, and a girl with a teddy bear. "It's you, me, and the nice lady," she said proudly. Ethan took the picture and smiled. But something inside him hurt. That afternoon, Madeline stood in front of the mirror, wearing a dark dress and silver earrings, ready for the investor dinner. She looked perfect, but she didn't feel like herself. She remembered Lila's laugh, the way Ethan looked at his daughter, the way her own apartment felt empty, no matter how clean or expensive it was. She took off the earrings and dropped them on the counter. At the restaurant, Jason waited at the table. His phone buzzed. A message. "Not coming." Madeline. At the park, Ethan helped Lila build a small paper boat. They watched it float on the water for a moment. Then she looked up and said, "Do you think she misses us?" Ethan sighed. "I don't know. But we're not missing pieces. We're already whole." Back at the office, Madeline stood at the window, her heels off, her hands holding the framed drawing. She thought about all the things she had: money, power, respect, and the things she did not: warmth, laughter, love. She whispered to the glass, "What am I so afraid of?" Outside, the janitor closet remained empty, but her heart was no longer quiet. Later that night, a delivery came to Ethan's park bench. An envelope with no return name. Inside was a card. I am not proud of how I handled things, but I am proud of who you are, and even prouder of who she is. Ethan looked at the card, then at Lila, then up at the stars. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. For the first time in days, the silence felt less heavy. In a city full of strangers, one woman sat alone in a glass tower. One man held his daughter close on a park bench. And something between them, unspoken and uncertain, still remained. Not love yet, but not gone either. Something waiting, something real. Morning light touched the windows of Stone Enterprises. The city below moved fast as always. But inside the building, everything felt quiet. Madeline stood at the center of a large conference room, wearing a soft white blouse and no makeup. Her eyes were clear, her voice calm. People from every department filled the seats. Phones were down, laptops closed. She began to speak. I built this company with my name, with my rules, with my pride. People nodded. Some looked confused, some curious. Madeline continued. But along the way, I lost something, something real. She looked out the window, then back at the room. I met a man who taught me more in silence than all these walls ever could. He reminded me that success without heart is just noise. The room stayed silent. Starting today, I'm stepping down. Gasps filled the space. Whispers moved through the air like wind. Madeline smiled. I'm not quitting life. I'm just changing where I stand. Later that day, Madeline stood outside a small library where a free art class for kids was being held. She held a bag of supplies, markers, notebooks, snacks. Inside, she saw Lila, laughing with other kids, drawing the same kind of bright, happy houses she always did. At the back of the room, Ethan watched quietly, his arms crossed, his eyes gentle. He saw Madeline before she spoke. He didn't move. She walked up slowly. Hi. Ethan nodded. You found us. She smiled. You left a map. She held up one of Lila's old drawings. The one with the swing and the flowers and the tall lady. Ethan almost smiled. They stood in silence for a moment. The sound of children filled the air. Madeline took a deep breath. I was wrong. I was scared. I thought love had to look a certain way, come from a certain world. She looked at Lila, but she showed me that love is simple. Not easy, but simple. Ethan looked at Madeline, his voice soft. Why now? Madeline looked him in the eyes. Because I don't want to live a life built only on glass and pride. I want to build something real, with hands, with heart. She pulled out a folder from her bag. Inside was a new set of papers, a proposal, a plan, a nonprofit for single parents, free housing support, job training, childcare, and the name on the front, the Carter Foundation. Ethan stared at it. His hands slowly opened the folder. Page after page, drawn like blueprints. Simple, strong, beautiful. You did this, he asked. Madeline nodded. We can do it together, if you'll let me. Lila ran up and wrapped her arms around Ethan's leg. Daddy, guess what? I made a new friend. And the nice lady brought cookies. Ethan picked her up and smiled. Yeah, I can see that. Madeline reached into her coat and pulled out a small box. She handed it to Lila. Inside was a necklace, a silver charm shaped like a tiny house. For your drawings. They help people see love. Lila held it up, her eyes wide. Thank you. They walked outside together. The sun was setting, the sky painted with soft orange and gold. Madeline looked at Ethan. I'm not asking for a perfect future. I just want to start something, real and small, and full of heart. Ethan looked at Lila, then back at Madeline. Then let's start with today. Weeks passed. The Carter Foundation opened its first center. Families came. Help was given. Laughter returned to places once filled with silence. Ethan designed every corner, each wall built with love and care. Madeline managed the programs. her sharp mind now serving something soft and meaningful. Lila became the heart of the place, with her drawings on every wall. One showed a small house with 2 big windows, a garden, a teddy bear, and 3 people smiling together. The janitor, who once cleaned in silence, now walked halls filled with purpose. The CEO, who once stood behind glass, now stood hand in hand with the people she used to ignore. And the little girl, who dreamed in crayons, now lived in color. Not every story ends with magic, but some end with choice. And when the choice is love, even the coldest buildings can become home.